Welcome to this new edition of Aha Moments with Elliott Connie. Of course, I'm your host, Elliott Connie. I'm super excited about this new podcast series, and I'm excited to share messages with you that I hope will inspire you, bring out the best in you, and drive you to become your best and most glorious self. And today, I want to talk to you about dealing with change. I'm going to tell you a quick story on how I learned to deal with change and how I carry lessons with me to this very day that started when I was a young person learning how to manage change. So I grew up in an environment where there was a lot of parental abuse. My father was a very aggressive guy and was the type of guy to overreact. Like if you didn't do your homework, you would be beaten. And if you spilled milk, you got in a lot of trouble. Like that was my environment. It was really unsafe and really difficult to grow up in. But it was also a lot of poverty. Now, change came into my life when I was in middle school. And what happened when I was in middle school is my parents, for the final time, tried to reconcile their relationship. They had been separated on and off for many years. And this was the last time they're going to try to reconcile. And at that time, my dad got a really powerful kind of high-paying job. And I often look back on that time and I tell people that that year was like a year of me living as a wealthy person in the middle of this difficult childhood, because my dad had this great job and we moved into this big house and we started getting all the cool toys that a kid would want at that time, like all the video game systems, and Christmas would be better than it had been previously, like all of those things. And I can remember my friends describing my life as if they wish they could be me. So they would come over to my house and they would see the video game systems that we had, and they would see all of the external signs of happiness and success, and they would say, like, we wish we had life like that too. But the truth is, I was miserable, because what they didn't know is every single evening, I wasn't sure whether or not it was going to be an evening of safety or not. I didn't know whether or not really difficult, negative, hard things would be happening or not. So they were only judging the kind of superficial signs of happiness and not looking more deeply into what was happening. So change eventually came. Like you got used to that life, like having a backyard. And I mean, it was just a different moment in the middle of my childhood. And then my parents separated for the final time and my dad moved out and we moved out because we couldn't keep that house. When we moved from this big, beautiful house in suburban Massachusetts, we moved to a 2-bedroom apartment. It was a very hectic move. And I can remember being incredibly disappointed moving from this wonderful house to this tiny 2-bedroom apartment on the second floor of this multi-family building. And when we moved in, I remember looking out the window and I saw a person I recognized from playing sports. And he was playing basketball in his driveway with his dad. So, I got all my stuff unpacked and asked my mom if I could go play with that kiddo. I was 12 years old at the time, and I walked down the driveway, and I'll never forget, his dad was playing basketball with him, and he almost had this like sense of relief that there was a young person that could play basketball with his son instead of him having to do it. And he threw the basketball towards me, and he said, you play with Kyle. And Kyle and I started playing basketball. And to this day, Kyle's my best friend. Like I love and adore Kyle, and we're very, very close. That was the beginning of probably the most positive part of my childhood. I spent the next 4 years almost every single day with Kyle. We took family vacations together. We did all of these things. That was when happiness was the most profound in my life. But it was also when we were living in the most cramped and difficult situation. So it was funny to me because prior to that, people thought I had the most idyllic life just because I had a big house. But now I live in this 2-bedroom apartment with my mom and 2 siblings. And I have so much joy because I have a best friend and we can go play sports and we could go do activities and we had camaraderie. And it was an amazing time in my life and it helped me deal with change. And to this day, I carry 2 lessons with me. Number 1 is never judge a book by its cover. If you look a little bit deeper, there's always more to the story. And number 2, in the midst of difficult things, you can always focus on positive things that are going on, and it could make a difference in the way you experience the difficulty. It was really difficult to go from this big, beautiful house to this tiny 2-bedroom apartment, but it was wonderful that every single day I got to wake up and go play with my best friend and shared many, many memories for the years to come. And to this day, I'm very close to his family, and I consider his parents like second parents for me, and I'm close to his children and his wife, and it just enriched my life, even though I didn't have a lot of material items at that time in my life. So those are the two lessons I carry with me. Never judge a book by its cover, and focus on positive things in the midst of a struggle. So what I want to invite you guys to do is just think back on your life, and I want you to think of what lessons did you learn from changes you had to go through your childhood, and just kind of sit with that for a moment. And like, what do you carry with you that are positive lessons you learned from dealing with change that occurred in your childhood? Today I want to talk about change, and the kind of change that kind of feels forced upon you, like the kind of change that you have to make even if you don't want to make it. And I was thinking about, like, how do I make this point that sometimes you have to go through change, but you can come out on the other side and be successful with a positive outcome. And I think about my life when I was 19 years old. So I'm going to take you all the way back to 1996. And in 1996, my mom had some health issues. We had some family dynamics going on. It seemed like everything was kind of coalescing all at once. Now, at the time, I had just finished an All-American baseball season and felt very strongly like I was on my way to a potential professional baseball career. But with my mom's health issues and the family dynamics going on, it seemed like remaining in Massachusetts, where I was and where I went to college and where I was having all of this success and where I grew up and felt most comfortable, was becoming less and less likely. My grandmother, who was very much the matriarch of our family, was instructing my mom that she needed to move out of Massachusetts to deal with her health issues and to address the family issues that were related to my father, her ex-husband. And my grandmother advised that she should pick either coming to where she grew up in Chicago, California, where we had some family, or Texas, where we had an aunt who was very close to my mom. So my mom decided that she wanted to come to Texas, where she had this aunt who she was very close to. And, I thought long and hard about, like, what do I do? Do I stay in Massachusetts where I'm comfortable and pursue a career in professional athletics? Do I go with my mom and move to Texas and kind of start my life over again? I really honestly debated, and for months I went back and forth, and I had some resources in Massachusetts. My best friend and his family were willing to take me in, and I had some opportunities and I had some options to make this a successful stay if I wanted to stay in Massachusetts. But to be honest with you, I was so concerned about my mom, and at that time I was so looking for change and looking to pursue bigger goals, and thankfully, I guess the best way I can describe it is I wasn't afraid to make choices that would make me uncomfortable. So ultimately, I decided to move to Texas. I chose a new school, chose a new major. At the time in Massachusetts, I was majoring in marine biology, believe it or not. And I went to Texas and began to major in psychology. And it ended up being the best decision I ever made in my life. To this very day, that's where I met the people closest to me, my very best friend, my wife. It just where I met everybody in my life began to change. But I think the most important thing that happened in those early years of being in Texas is I didn't have those safety nets and the crutches that I had in Massachusetts. Like, I didn't have long-term friendships that I could lean on to help me deal with things. Like, I had to grow up. I had to become a man. I had to become proficient. I had to deal with life. And looking back, I think that was the best thing I could have done. Like, instead of hiding from life and distracting myself with, like, hanging out with my friends and going to do fun things. Like, in Massachusetts after high school, and we used to travel to Providence, Rhode Island to go to, like, clubs and party and hang out. And it was a wonderful distraction from all the pains and problems in my life. And now here I am in Texas, and I don't know anyone, and I don't know where people hang out. Even if I did, I wouldn't know who to hang out with. And I had to kind of figure out who I was, and I had to deal with me, and I had to deal with life, and I had to deal with pain, and I had to deal with struggle. And in hindsight, it was the best thing I ever did. So sometimes you have a change that is forced upon you, and the circumstances seem less than ideal. And trust me, there were many sleepless nights. There were many tearful moments. There were many moments where I didn't think I was strong enough to do it. But now looking back, having the courage to make myself make this choice and put myself in an environment that was very much making me uncomfortable was the best thing I could ever do. I assume that you guys out there listening are like me. Like, you've also had hard things thrust upon you. You also had to go through things that were difficult but had a positive outcome after a while and somehow. So what I want to invite you to do is to just take some time and reflect on a hard thing that you went through. What was the positive outcome from that hard thing? And then how did you help that positive outcome come from that difficult thing? The beginning of any journey can be really, really challenging as we try to figure out what's the best way to accomplish the outcome that we're in pursuit of. And I'm about to tell you the best decision that I ever made, which was probably the hardest decision that I ever made, that I think really highlights the challenges that we experience when we're in the beginning of a new journey. Let me take you guys into a time in my life when I was at the beginning of my professional career. I had gotten a job at a brain treatment center very late in my college years. I was probably 6 months away from graduating with a bachelor's degree in psychology, which to me was a major accomplishment. Like, coming from where I came from, being able to have this degree was a major, major accomplishment. Part of my job working at the brain treatment center was I would take the people who lived there on field trips on the weekends, and I would drive the company van to do it. So one day I took the company van to get lunch, which I was allowed to do, and I took the company van to get lunch, and I went to this Chinese food restaurant, never forget, and I'm backing out of the parking space, and the mirror clipped the vehicle sitting next to me, which was this beautiful Lexus SUV, and it left a dent about a foot long on the side of the vehicle. And I thought for a moment about just peeling off and never looking back, but my conscience wouldn't let me do that. And I wrote a note and put the note on the car saying, man, I damaged your car. Here's my phone number. I have to go back to work, but call me. The next day he did not call me, and I was so relieved. I was like, ooh, maybe he's not going to call. But then the following day he did, and he told me I had an estimate done on the vehicle, and the cost of the repair will be $600. Now, at the time, I had no money at all. And one of my biggest fears was if this man reported this to his insurance, then my insurance rate was going to go up. And at the time, I just couldn't afford that. So I asked him, look, $600 is more than I have, and I don't want my insurance to go up. So I would love to pay you cash, but I'd have to pay you in installments because I don't have $600 to pay you right away. And he said, sure. Man, it was very nice. And he said, bring $200 to me once a month for the next 3 months, and that will be your $600. And that was great. So he gave me the address of where he worked. He worked at a Radio Shack. He was the franchisee owner at the Radio Shack. And for the next 3 months, that's what I did. I brought him $200, 3 months, like clockwork. Now, the last time I brought him money, he complimented me, and he said, for someone your age, and at the time I was probably 23, to have left the note and then shown up every single time with the $200, it says a lot about your character and the type of person that you are. And he said, I want to give you a job opportunity as a result of the way you have conducted yourself. I want to help you. And he told me what he wanted to do was bring me in to the Radio Shack Managers Training Program, which had a starting salary, if my memory serves me correct, it was $96,000 a year. And I would start as soon as next week. And the cool thing about this program was as soon as the training started, that's when your salary started to be $96,000 a year. And I cannot stress enough. I mean, $96,000 to me was a kabillion dollars. It was an astronomical amount of money. And I went home and I talked to my mom about it. I talked to my aunt about it. I talked to God about it. Like, I prayed about it. Like, I really thought long and hard about it. What do I do? Because I knew I wanted to be in the helping professions. I didn't necessarily know it was as a psychotherapist, but I wanted to get my bachelor's degree and then use it to help people. But I also wanted to make money. And I was at a time in my life when I had none of it. And this job would have changed my entire family experience. I mean, this job would have completely changed everything. But I made the really, really hard choice to just stick to my path of wanting to become a helping professional, wanting to get my bachelor's degree and use it to be able to help people. So I called the man the next day and I thanked him for the opportunity and I turned it down. So many people in my life told me I was crazy. I even thought I was crazy a little bit. But that was the necessary thing that I had to do to be able to stay on the path to achieving the outcome I wanted, which was becoming a helping professional. Now I look back and, I run this large training organization. I love my job. I love my team. I got some major projects in the works. And Radio Shack has gone out of business. So it turned out to have been a really good decision. And in the long run, I did really well. I think a lot of times people make decisions that are short-term positive, but in the long term, not good. And in the long run, this one was really good. So I want to invite you guys to think about hard decisions you made in your past and how they worked out for you. One of the areas in our lives where we experience the most changes is our relationships. In fact, in our relationships, I don't even like to call them changes. I like to call them evidence of evolution. Now, there's a thing happening right now in a very well-known couple's lives that's demonstrative of this, and that is Will Smith and his wife, Jada Pinkett Smith, who have recently made it publicly known that they have an open relationship. Will Smith posted that we decided that for us, marriage could not be a prison. And they have, while being in each other's lives, decided to also see other people and have a relationship that works for them in that way. Now, I thought about that as I was watching these things transpire, and it hit the news in a kind of a negative way recently because Jada Pinkett Smith went on her very popular Facebook watch show, Red Table Talk, and talked about their relationship and said some pretty difficult things. I believe she described Will Smith as trash in bed, and social media has been dogpiling on Will Smith and dogpiling on Jada Pinkett Smith for saying that about her husband. But the thing that I noticed is Will Smith did not respond. Will Smith did not defend himself. Will Smith did not attack his wife. This is a relationship that they have built that works for them. And it wasn't the way their original relationship started 20 years ago. And if you think about that, like when we meet our partners, and a lot of us, we meet our partners in college, or we meet our partners in high school, and we start building a lifelong relationship when we're in our late teens and early 20s. And then we sustain that relationship into our 30s and 40s and later life. We sustain that relationship going from, college kids to professionals in jobs and professionals in careers. We sustain those relationships as we have our own children. We sustain those relationships as we evolve through life. And sometimes we have to change the dynamics within our relationship. Now, that doesn't always mean that we have to have an open relationship. That's what works for Will Smith and Jada Pinkett Smith. But it does mean we have to be very interested in looking at our partners and deciding, what type of relationship do I want to have? What type of life do I want to build with my partner? And how can I build a life that would lead towards joy, happiness, and satisfaction? Even if it's not the way that we started, even if it's not where I thought we would be, but we have to constantly look at life and see what things work for us in a new dynamic and what things don't. Life is really, really hard. And one of the things that makes life so challenging is it does not stay the same. Life moves, life evolves. As we go through this pandemic, so many people had a life where both parents would wake up in the morning and then go to a job and then come home at the end of the day to that job. And then immediately, as a result of COVID-19, they're now back at home. They're in each other's space all day, working from home, and oftentimes with children who are also doing schoolwork at home, and they have to change the dynamic of their relationship. So relationship change is not something to fear. Relationship change is something to be embraced. Relationship change is something that we should anticipate. Relationship change is just the reality of being in a long-term relationship. I opened my first therapy practice in 2007 in a place called Keller, Texas. And I used to go visit a place called South Lake Town Square, it's a lovely square to go, and you see people walking and holding hands. And I used to take a break and drive to the South Lake Town Square and walk around, and I would see older couples walking and holding hands. And I would look at them and I would just think, gosh, they're so lucky to have found their soulmates and to still be in these relationships experiencing joy and satisfaction. And then, years later, 15 years later, I would go back to that same town square and I would see elderly, older couples. And I would think to myself, this time, they look like warriors to me because they had weathered the storm And I realized the difference is 15 years ago, I thought people in long relationships were lucky to have found their soulmate. And 15 years later, I realized people in long, sustained, happy relationships are people who have weathered the difficult storms and dealt with the changes and went about creating relationships with their partners that would work for them. Now they look like warriors to me. It looked like they'd been through the struggle and they come out on the other side with a well-earned victory. So I want you guys to think of ways that you could work with your partner to make sure you evolve with them and not against them. Thank you so much for listening to this episode. Please subscribe to my podcast on Apple Podcasts and share it with your friends. Have you ever had a moment where you knew your life was never going to be the same? And I mean that in a positive way. Like, have you ever had a moment where you were so excited about what your future would look like because of something that had happened that your life would never be the same? I can remember the first moment that stands out to me in that way is I remember getting my bachelor's degree. It was a really hard fought effort for me to get my bachelor's degree. Like I come from an environment where I didn't have a ton of money. There wasn't a whole lot of educated people around me. And for me to have the expectation that I would have a bachelor's degree was just not part of my makeup. I worked so hard to get it. And I had so many difficult jobs. Like, I had a job where I literally changed adult diapers for people who were living in a brain trauma center getting my bachelor's degree. I worked 18 hours a day every weekend, Saturday and Sunday, literally from 7 a.m. from 11 p.m. It was the longest, hardest job ever. And then one day I had acquired enough college credits that I was going to have a bachelor's degree. And I will never forget the moment I was walking across that stage and the dean of the school handed me my degree. And I heard this rumor that they actually don't put your degree in the binder that they give you. They just put a piece of paper in there and they mail your degree to you later. So I didn't want to open it. I walked off the stage and I walked past some family and I gave them a hug. And then I walked back to my seat and I looked at my degree and it was in there. It wasn't a blank piece of paper. It was actually my degree. And I started to cry because I knew from this moment forward, I could pursue a career. I knew from this moment forward, I didn't have to take jobs that were difficult. I knew from this moment forward, nothing would ever be the same. And I wept as I sat in my seat and I thought about the opportunities and I thought about the things that I could now do. I thought about the fact that for the rest of my life, I will be able to describe myself as someone who has earned a bachelor's degree. Recently, I had another moment where something happened in my career and I knew from this moment forward, nothing will ever be the same. I knew from this moment forward, all of the hard work had led to opportunities that will change my life. And all of the hard work has now created chances, has now made things happen that things will never be the same. And that's a glorious feeling because it makes you think about the future in hopeful ways. And for me, that's the gift of hard work. I think hard work is one of the most important contributing factors to positive change. You know, I heard a quote once when somebody said, luck is when opportunity meets hard work. So you have to work really, really hard and you have to be really, really disciplined. You have to be really, really determined. But hard work is this brilliant thing that brings about more luck and brings about more hope. You know, thinking about your future in hopeful ways is probably the most game-changing, amazing, remarkable thing that you could ever do. If you're living a life where you're looking at your future with dread, I want to invite you to do more things that cause you to think about your future in hopeful ways. I want you to do more things that cause you to look at your future in an optimal way. I want you to look at your future in a way that just ignites your passion and fire to live in that future. Build the future that you would like to live in and understand it will not be easy. Understand it will not come quickly. Understand it will require hard work. It will require discipline. It will require you to surround yourself with people who support your skills, talents, dreams, and hopes. Understand that it is part of your duty. If you want to have a successful future, then you have to tackle this task. You have to think about and build the type of future that you would like to live in, and then step into that future. I'm here to tell you, it is not going to be easy, but it is going to be worth it. So I want to invite all of you who are listening to me right now to think about how you could build a future you would like to live in, and start taking the steps to build that future, to manifest that future, to bring that future into reality, and watch how amazing life gets. And again, it won't be easy. It's going to require hard work. It won't come quickly. It's going to require patience, but it'll happen. And it happened for me. And if it happened for me, it could happen for all of you. So thank you for listening. Please subscribe to this podcast on Apple Podcasts and share it with your friends.